You didn't suddenly become sensitive. You still eat the same breakfast, the same coffee, the same dinner you've eaten for years. But now, something feels different. A heaviness that wasn't there before. A bloated feeling after meals that used to feel normal. Sometimes a quiet burning in the chest at night. Not painful enough to panic, just uncomfortable enough to notice. So you blame the food. Maybe the restaurant changed the oil. Maybe the vegetables aren't fresh anymore. Maybe your taste is changing. But what if none of that is true? What if the food didn't change and your body simply stopped staying silent? After 40, the stomach doesn't fail suddenly. It renegotiates slowly. For decades, your digestive system compensated. Late dinners, fast eating, stress eating, coffee on an empty stomach. It absorbed pressure without complaint. Until one day it didn't. Not because you are weak, and not because you are sick, because tolerance ages faster than strength. Your muscles can still lift, your mind can still work long hours, but your gut begins asking for different rules. And here is the part most people misunderstand. These symptoms are not the problem. They are the message. Ignore the message, and the body increases the volume. Listen early, and you change the ending. Tonight we're not talking about diets. We're talking about why your body changed its relationship with food. To understand why this begins after 40, you have to stop thinking about food and start thinking about tolerance. Your digestive system was never designed to be perfect. It was designed to adapt. In your 20s and 30s, your stomach had a large safety margin. It produced strong acid. It released enzymes quickly. Its lining repaired itself fast. So even when your habits weren't ideal, the system compensated. Late meals were processed anyway. Greasy food was broken down anyway. Coffee on an empty stomach was tolerated anyway. You didn't notice the effort because compensation feels normal. But compensation is not permanent. It is a reserve, and aging slowly spends that reserve. After 40, 3 quiet changes begin to overlap. First, stomach acid becomes less consistent. Not necessarily low all the time. Just less predictable. Some meals digest normally, others sit longer than they should. Food remaining longer means fermentation begins earlier. Gas forms sooner. Pressure builds faster. You don't feel sick, you feel heavy. Second, digestive timing loses precision. Your stomach used to empty like a scheduled train. Now it runs more like traffic. Stress delays it. Fat delays it. Large portions delay it more than before. So food and acid stay together longer. And that increases reflux even if acid isn't excessive. This is why many people think they suddenly have too much acid, when the real change is exposure time. Third, the gut lining becomes less tolerant to irritation. Not damaged, not diseased, just less forgiving. Spicy foods feel sharper. Fried foods feel denser. Cold foods feel uncomfortable. The body hasn't become fragile, it has become selective. For decades, your stomach protected you from your habits. Now it asks you to protect it instead. And here is the important part. These changes don't happen overnight. They accumulate quietly, which is why people often say everything was fine until this year. But this year wasn't the beginning, it was the threshold. Your body crossed from compensation into communication. Symptoms are not random events. They're scheduled notifications from a system that has run in silent mode for years. You're not reacting to a meal, you're reacting to a history. And once you see it that way, the goal is no longer avoiding certain foods. The goal becomes understanding what your stomach is now trying to regulate. Because after 40, digestion stops being automatic. It becomes a relationship. Once symptoms begin, most people don't panic. They adjust. They change restaurants. They blame specific dishes. They avoid one ingredient at a time. First dairy, then spicy food, then fried food. Each removal feels logical, but the discomfort keeps returning. So the conclusion becomes simple. My stomach is getting weaker. But weakness is rarely the real story. The real change is sensitivity to patterns, not ingredients. After 40, the stomach cares less about what you eat, and more about how and when you eat. Two identical meals can produce completely different reactions depending on timing, stress, and speed. A rushed lunch in 10 minutes creates pressure. The same meal eaten slowly does not. A late dinner near sleep produces burning. An earlier dinner does not. Coffee after a full breakfast feels fine. Coffee on an empty stomach feels sharp. The food didn't change, the context did. But because the reaction appears after eating, the food gets the blame. This leads to the first common mistake: endless elimination. People slowly reduce their diet to safe foods, plain meals, small variety, predictable choices. At first, symptoms improve slightly, not because the stomach healed, but because the digestive load decreased. Then, weeks later, the discomfort returns again. Now, even simple foods feel heavy. The person concludes something is seriously wrong. In reality, the stomach was never asking for restriction. It was asking for rhythm. The second mistake is neutralizing symptoms instead of understanding them. Antacids become routine, not occasionally, daily. The burning disappears quickly, which feels like success. But acid was never only the problem. Timing and exposure were. Reducing acid repeatedly can slow digestion further, allowing food to stay longer and ferment more. Relief today becomes heaviness tomorrow, so the cycle continues. The third mistake is eating less instead of eating differently. Breakfast is skipped to rest the stomach. Lunch is delayed because of work. Dinner becomes the largest meal of the day. The stomach then faces its biggest task at the worst time, when metabolism is slowing for the night. Morning emptiness increases sensitivity. Night fullness increases reflux. Again, food is blamed. But the real issue is scheduling. Here is what makes midlife digestion confusing. Symptoms feel chemical, but the cause is behavioral. People search for a specific trigger food when the trigger is actually accumulated pressure. Not one meal, but many fast meals. Not one late night, but years of late nights. When the body tolerated everything, habits didn't matter. Now that tolerance narrowed, habits became visible, and visibility feels like sudden change. This is why people say, "I ate this my whole life with no problem." They're correct. The meal is old. The signals are new. Because the stomach has moved from silent processing to active negotiation. And negotiation requires participation, not fear, not restriction, but awareness. By the time most people reach this point, they start searching for a diet. Low-acid foods, soft foods, easily digestible foods. But the stomach is rarely asking you to eat less variety. It is asking you to change the conditions under which digestion happens. After 40, digestion becomes less about strength and more about coordination. Your stomach still works, but it prefers predictability over intensity. The first thing it asks for is timing, not strict schedules, but consistent spacing. When meals arrive randomly, the digestive system prepares randomly. Acid release becomes uneven. Enzymes arrive late or early. The result is not immediate pain, it is incomplete digestion. Food lingers, pressure builds quietly. But when meals arrive at roughly similar times each day, the stomach begins preparing in advance. The digestion starts before eating, not after. The second thing it asks for is pace. In younger years, speed was forgiven. Now speed becomes friction. Eating quickly sends large particles into a system that now processes more carefully. The stomach is forced to work longer instead of smarter. This does not create dramatic symptoms. It creates duration, heaviness that lasts hours, fullness that doesn't match the portion size. Slowing down does not strengthen digestion. It reduces workload. The third thing it asks for is sequence, not food rules. Order. When meals begin with dense or fatty foods, digestion stalls early. Acid and enzymes engage at maximum level immediately. But when digestion begins gently, warm foods, simpler textures, smaller first portions, the stomach calibrates gradually. The same meal feels different because the entry was different. The fourth thing it asks for is space before rest. Nighttime is when repair happens, not processing. A late, heavy meal forces the stomach to stay active, while the rest of the body prepares for recovery. This creates the familiar night burning or morning heaviness many assume is a specific food intolerance. Often, it is a timing conflict, and the final thing it asks for is attention, not constant monitoring, just acknowledgement. Signals after meals are not interruptions to life, they are part of regulation. A body that was silent for decades now communicates in small ways. If ignored, the signals intensify. If noticed early, they stabilise. So the solution after 40 is rarely removing food entirely. It is removing unpredictability. Your stomach is not failing you. It is inviting you into cooperation. For most of your life, digestion worked automatically. Now it works interactively. And interaction, once understood, often feels easier than restriction. Many people quietly fear what these symptoms mean. They wonder if something is breaking down, if aging has finally started to take things away. But digestion after 40 is not a loss of function. It is a shift in priority. For most of your early life, the body focused on expansion, growth, strength, capacity. It tolerated irregular schedules because energy was abundant. Repair was fast. Reserves were deep. You could overload the system, and the system would still keep up. Midlife changes the objective. The body stops prioritizing output and starts prioritizing preservation. Not because it is weaker, but because it is protecting longevity. The stomach becomes one of the first places this appears because digestion sits at the intersection of stress, timing, and energy use. Processing food is not passive work. It is one of the most energy-demanding tasks the body performs every day. Earlier in life, excess energy covered inefficient habits. Now efficiency matters more than volume. This is why the same meal at the same size feels heavier than before. Not because you cannot digest it, but because your body evaluates whether it should. After 40, the body filters. It asks, is this meal arriving at the right time? Is the nervous system calm enough to process it? Is there enough space before rest to complete the work? When the answer is no, the body slows the process instead of forcing it. Slowing feels like discomfort, but it is actually regulation. You're not experiencing failure. You're experiencing negotiation. And negotiation is a sign of intelligence in the system. A machine runs at the same speed until it breaks. A living organism adjusts speed to survive longer. The discomfort you notice is not punishment for aging. It is feedback for adaptation. This is why people who listen early often feel better than they did years before. Not because they became younger, but because they became synchronized with their physiology. Midlife health is rarely about dramatic change. It is about alignment. Smaller meals at calmer times, similar foods at more predictable hours, enough space for rest. The body responds quickly to cooperation. And once cooperation begins, symptoms often fade without extreme diets or strict rules. Because the goal was never to eliminate pleasure, it was to restore communication. After 40, your stomach is no longer a silent worker. It becomes a partner. And partners don't need control. They need understanding. Imagine the same foods you normally eat. Not a new diet. Not special ingredients. Just an ordinary day arranged differently. Morning begins without urgency. Instead of coffee being the first signal your stomach receives, it senses gentle activity first. Movement. Light. A small amount of food. The digestive system wakes gradually, the way your eyes adjust to daylight. Coffee now enters a prepared environment, not an empty one. Nothing dramatic changes, yet sharpness disappears. Midday arrives. You still eat a normal meal, but speed is no longer the priority. The first few minutes are slower than the rest. This alone changes the entire digestive response, because digestion does not start in the stomach. It starts in anticipation. Chewing is not mechanical breakdown. It is instruction. The stomach receives a message about quantity and effort required. When the message is rushed, the stomach overcompensates. When the message is clear, the stomach works precisely. The meal feels lighter, even though the portion is identical. Afternoon passes without heaviness. Not because the food was small, but because the body understood it. Evening becomes the real turning point. Dinner is no longer the largest event of the day. It is the calmest. The same familiar foods, but slightly earlier and slightly simpler. Now digestion and rest no longer compete. The body finishes processing before sleep asks for recovery. Night reflux fades not through restriction, but through timing alignment. Morning heaviness disappears because the previous day completed properly. Nothing magical occurred. No supplement forced change. No food group was eliminated. Only friction was removed. This is the hidden shift after 40. The body rewards cooperation more than discipline. Strict diets often fail because they fight behavior with rules. Rhythm succeeds because it works with biology. When digestion understands your schedule, it stops defending itself. And many symptoms people chase for years quietly resolve when the day becomes predictable. Not perfect, not rigid, just consistent enough for the body to trust what comes next. Health in midlife rarely comes from intensity. It comes from making ordinary days easier for the body to manage. And once the body no longer struggles, comfort returns without effort. At this point, many people begin asking a quiet question. If this is normal aging, how do I know something isn't actually wrong? Because the discomfort feels real. The heaviness after meals, the pressure at night, the occasional burning. And once you start noticing it, you notice it more often. The mind fills the gaps with possibilities. Maybe an ulcer, maybe chronic disease, maybe permanent damage. But the body usually gives clarity through patterns. Serious conditions tend to ignore rhythm. Functional changes respond to rhythm. When symptoms vary day to day, better on calm days, worse on rushed days, the digestive system is reacting, not failing. When discomfort appears after late meals but disappears after earlier ones, the system is negotiating timing. When certain meals feel heavy only when eaten quickly, the issue is load management, not structural damage. The body is communicating through context. Disease tends to be consistent. Regulation tends to be conditional. This distinction matters because fear changes behavior more than symptoms do. People begin overcorrecting. They remove too many foods. They eat too little. They monitor every sensation. Stress increases and digestion tightens further. The stomach reacts not only to food, but also to the nervous system observing it. Attention becomes pressure. Pressure becomes sensitivity. This is why reassurance improves digestion almost as much as dietary change. The body relaxes when the mind stops expecting harm. However, there are moments when the body does not negotiate. Signals that remain stable regardless of timing. Pain that wakes you from sleep consistently. Unintended weight loss. Persistent difficulty swallowing. These are not louder versions of normal signals. They are different categories of signals. Normal midlife digestion fluctuates. Structural problems persist. Most people experiencing new discomfort after 40 are not encountering damage. They are encountering awareness. The digestive system has simply moved from background function to foreground communication. Earlier in life, it absorbed habits silently. Now it asks for participation. And participation feels unfamiliar at first. But unfamiliar is not dangerous. Often, the most helpful step is not eliminating food, but observing patterns for a few weeks. Noticing when symptoms appear. Noticing when they disappear. Patterns restore confidence. Confidence reduces tension. Reduced tension improves digestion. The cycle reverses. Instead of symptom to fear to worsening, it becomes symptom to understanding to stability. The body rarely demands perfection. It asks for cooperation. And once cooperation replaces worry, most midlife digestive discomfort loses its urgency. Because the message was never that something is breaking. The message was that something has started speaking. Most people assume health declines suddenly. One year you feel normal, the next year everything seems sensitive, but the body rarely changes in a single moment. It changes in permission. For decades, your body permitted your lifestyle: irregular sleep, fast meals, stress eating, late nights followed by early mornings. It allowed these not because they were harmless, but because recovery capacity was high. You experienced resilience and interpreted it as safety. After 40, the body quietly removes certain permissions, not as punishment, as protection. The stomach is often the first place this appears because digestion is the daily checkpoint of your habits. Every meal asks the body a question: can we process this comfortably today? When the answer becomes not under these conditions, symptoms appear. So midlife discomfort is rarely a sign that life is shrinking. It is a sign that margins are narrowing, and narrowing margins are valuable. They force awareness. Earlier in life, habits were invisible because consequences were delayed. Now feedback arrives faster. A late meal shows up at night. A rushed lunch shows up in the afternoon. An empty stomach coffee shows up within minutes. The body is not becoming fragile. It is becoming honest. Honesty feels inconvenient at first because it removes the illusion of unlimited flexibility. But it also creates something new: predictability. When the body responds consistently to behaviour, you gain influence over how you feel. Small adjustments produce noticeable changes. This is why people who adapt in their 40s often feel more stable in their 50s than they did in their 30s. Not because aging stopped, but because uncertainty decreased. Health becomes less about reacting to problems and more about preventing friction. The stomach teaches this principle early. It shows that comfort is not the result of perfect food, but of compatible conditions. And once you understand conditions, you stop chasing solutions. You start shaping environments. Instead of asking, what food should I avoid? You begin asking, what situation helps my body succeed? This shift spreads beyond digestion. Sleep improves when evenings slow down. Energy improves when mornings begin gradually. Mental clarity improves when meals stop competing with stress. The body functions as a coordinated system, not isolated organs. The stomach was simply the first to complain loudly enough. Many people try to regain their 20s. They search for supplements, strict diets, or intense routines to restore unlimited tolerance. But longevity is not built by restoring old permissions. It is built by accepting new agreements. Your body is no longer designed for endurance without feedback. It is designed for cooperation with feedback, and cooperation is efficient. Instead of spending energy compensating for habits, the body spends energy maintaining stability. Less inflammation, more consistent energy, fewer unpredictable reactions. This is the quiet advantage of midlife awareness. You trade freedom without awareness for comfort with understanding. At first, it feels restrictive. Later, it feels liberating because you finally know what works. The stomach did not become a limitation. It became a guide, and guides do not reduce life. They remove unnecessary struggle. So the question is no longer, why can't I eat like before? The better question becomes, what kind of rhythm allows me to feel good most days? Because after 40, health is not the absence of symptoms. It is the presence of alignment. When alignment improves, food becomes enjoyable again, sleep becomes deeper, and days become steadier. Not by force, but by understanding. Your stomach didn't betray you. It started telling the truth earlier than the rest of your body. And if you listen now, the next decades often feel easier than the last ones, not younger, but clearer. There is a quiet moment many people experience after understanding this. Not relief exactly, not worry either, more like recognition. They realize the body did not suddenly become difficult. They simply started hearing it. For years, comfort came from silence. You could eat at any hour, sleep at any time, rush through meals without noticing consequences, and because nothing protested, you assumed everything was fine. But silence was never proof of balance. It was proof of tolerance. Now tolerance has narrowed, and feedback has begun. The first instinct is resistance, trying to restore the old normal, eating the same way but hoping for different results, searching for a single food to blame. Yet over time, most people notice something interesting. When they slow slightly, symptoms soften. When meals arrive earlier, nights calm down. When eating becomes attentive, heaviness fades. No dramatic transformation, just steady improvement. The body responds quickly once it feels understood. This is why midlife health often feels confusing. You don't need extreme discipline, but you also cannot ignore patterns anymore. The middle ground is awareness, not counting calories, not measuring every bite, just noticing cause and effect. A meal late in the evening speaks at night. A rushed morning echoes in the afternoon. A calm day digests better than a stressful one, even with identical food. Over weeks, confidence grows. You stop fearing random reactions because they are no longer random. You begin predicting how you will feel based on how you live, and predictability is deeply calming. Health stops being something fragile you protect and becomes something cooperative you maintain. Your stomach teaches this first, but the lesson spreads everywhere. Energy becomes steadier, sleep becomes easier, focus lasts longer, not from restriction, but from removing daily friction. Many people search for one perfect habit, but the real change is simpler. Respect signals early so they never need to become loud. Your body rarely asks for perfection, it asks for partnership. If you listen occasionally, it doesn't need to interrupt constantly, and over months the relationship changes. Meals feel lighter, even familiar foods become comfortable again. Because the problem was never the food itself, it was the conversation around it. This is the real shift after 40. You stop trying to control the body and start working with it. And when that happens, aging feels less like loss and more like clarity. If this explanation helped you understand something you've been noticing, save this video so you can return to it later. And if you want more videos that make everyday body changes easier to understand, you can follow this channel. Not to chase perfect health, but to make daily life feel steadier. Because most long-term health doesn't come from big decisions. It comes from small adjustments you understand well enough to keep. And once you understand them, taking care of yourself becomes quieter and much easier. Later tonight, or maybe tomorrow morning, you will probably eat something familiar again. And without trying, you may notice the experience differently. Not analysing, just noticing. How fast the first bites disappear, how quickly the stomach reacts to pace, how calm meals feel when nothing else competes for attention. Nothing about the food will be new, but your awareness will be. Midlife rarely changes life dramatically in one day. It changes perception gradually. You begin to see connections that were invisible before. Sleep affects appetite. Stress affects digestion. Timing affects comfort more than ingredients. You stop separating health into categories. Instead of stomach problems, it becomes part of a daily rhythm. And rhythm is easier to live with than rules. Rules demand effort. Rhythm reduces effort. You don't need to remember instructions when the body naturally prefers a certain order. This is why many people later describe this age as steadier. Not because the body is stronger than before, but because it finally makes sense. Signals arrive early enough to adjust instead of late enough to repair. You gain influence, not control. Control fights the body. Influence works beside it. There will still be rushed days, late dinners, celebrations that ignore timing. Health after 40 does not require perfection. It benefits from returning to balance more often than leaving it. One comfortable day teaches more than many strict ones. Because comfort reinforces behaviour. You repeat what feels good without forcing it. And slowly, taking care of yourself stops feeling like a task and starts feeling like a preference, not discipline. Not restriction, just a quieter cooperation between you and a body that has begun speaking more clearly.